At Auto Industriya, we're all about answering the important questions in your motoring life. Like, how do you drive safely? What's the most affordable car for you? What's a right fit for your family? Well, today, we're a little different because we're gonna answer the important 3.88 million peso question. Type R or Nissan Z? Hey everyone, Vince here from Auto Industriya, and what I have for you today, well, I have two cars for a not so comparo. We have the Civic Type R there. We've driven that several times already, but the one we're really focusing on is this one. This is the new Nissan Z or 400Z, depending on how you actually want to refer to it. Now, the Z car is absolutely one of the most iconic ones in Japanese auto history. It first started around 1969 with the 240Z, and it really kind of ignited a passion within Nissan. Although in other markets, you know it as just a Z, there or thereabouts, but in Japan, it's known as the Fairlady Z. And the reason it's known as Fairlady Z, well, because of the movie or Broadway musical, My Fair Lady. You know, this is like a dancing partner for you on the road. One of the cars that I would really consider to be a dream would be the 240Z, the original generation of the Nissan Z. And with this one, I love that it's absolutely a throwback to the original, because look at how that front air dam is. Because the way it looks, the way they squared it off or rectangulared it off, it just looks so cool. The headlights, of course, they can't go with the fully round headlights. They went with this style, which I think complements the body very well. Now, this being a front engine, rear wheel drive sports car, well, it's gonna have that long hood. The cabin is set far back, which is proper for a Nissan Z car. The wheels, these are actually huge. And even the brakes, they fill in the wheel wells really well for something like this. But make no mistake about it, this is not an all-out sports car, performance car. This is more of a grand tourer. And later when we drive you, we'll show you just how that is. So like I said, the Nissan Z, front engine, rear wheel drive, and you can see it with the body. Now, I do like what Nissan did in that they kept it as simple and actually as faithful an homage to the original as possible with the way the vehicle looks. Again, cabin set back. They didn't bother with any fancy kind of door like the one on, say, the GTR where you press it and then you flip something like that. Just a simple door here, nothing fancy at all. It does open wide. You don't really need to have it really open that wide because, well, there's no rear seat here unless, you know, you have somebody with really tiny to get in there, but you wouldn't really do that. But still, this is a pure two-seater sports car, proper for what it should be. What else do you have? Of course, this one, the Nissan Z, we've seen this on the other models before, which does look cool here. It does have the black roof with a silver accent there, not chrome. Very nice. Fuel lid here. It says premium unleaded fuel only in English and Arabic. We're not going to be loading this up with anything less than 97 octane or lower. Now, some do call the Z a hatchback, but it's really more of a liftback. But first, the rear design, I actually really like it. It's also kind of a throwback to the originals, and it's much cleaner looking compared to the 370Z, the one that had quite a few curves. This one is a bit more, I guess, linear in the way they did it. Now, in the yellow, it does look cool. You have the Z there, Nissan emblem there. It's a neat little trick there. Dual exhaust, of course, I wouldn't expect anything less. The diffuser might not be a real one, but still, it does look pretty cool. Now, to pop the lift gate, you actually press a button inside the Nissan logo, and then this part lifts up. Now, in terms of cargo space, well, we can't really expect much from this car because in terms of the maximum length, it's only about 35 inches. The maximum width is also very narrow. It's around 54 thereabouts. The minimum width is about 20. And how shallow it is, it's about 8 inches from the floor up to here. So it's not really for carrying cargo. Maybe for a, let's say, the kind of cabin luggage should be no problem in this one. But more, often than not, it's just, backpacks and stuff. What's neat here is when we remove this carpet, and the floorboard, we can see that there is no spare tire. It does have a tire repair kit with the fluid and all that stuff. You can see a part of the frame right there. They really try to make it as rigid as possible. That's why you also have this tower over there. But instead of a spare tire, it has a Bose subwoofer system. Yeah, the audio on this one is actually pretty good. Now we need to put back that cover. The first impression we get when we pop the hood of the Z is, grabe, busog na busog yung engine bay. There's really no space to even get your hand in there, much less do any kind of tuning. I'm sure some of the guys did some tuning with this one, but looking at it right now, it's quite tight in there. I mean, you have battery here, brake fluid there, but everything just hoses. They just stuck whatever they can, wherever they can, like the ECU here, or maybe one of the ECUs, but really, even the strut, the way the strut bar crosses over the engine bay, they had to make a relief cut on the cosmetic engine cover to be able to accommodate it. Now, powering this one is a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 engine. It's derived from an Infinity engine, but what's important is that it's actually smaller than the vehicle it replaced, which was 3.7 liters in the 370Z. But this one, it makes 383 horsepower and 475 Newton meters of torque. Plenty for something of this size. And earlier when I was driving it around on the little slippery, mossy patches of road, it really was a bit, it can get a bit twitchy if you turn off your stability control. Now, for the transmission, you've got two options. There is a 6-speed manual with a carbon fiber drive shaft to the rear wheels, of course. This one is the 9-speed automatic, but not with the carbon fiber, I think, drive shaft. For some reason, they went with the steel one, I think. So that's really the difference here. This is a 2-pedal GT, whereas the other one is the one more, performance-oriented if you want to do the shifting all by yourself. The pricing, I think, for both is pretty much the same. So it's really up to you which one you pick. But for now, let's go inside and see what else we can find with the new Z. So this is the interior of the new Z. And as you can see, it's actually significantly changed from the previous generation. The way they did this, of course, everything is still very much driver-centric. You've got a full digital cockpit here, meaning digital screen, digital screen. You do have 3 analog gauges right up here on top, just like the previous one. But instead of, like, say, oil pressure and all that, what it does show you now is, well, basically boost. So you've got boost right here on the left. That's your left gauge. The one in the middle is your turbo speed, which actually is surprising. I don't think I've ever seen a turbo speed gauge. It's basically in basically if it says 5 there, it basically means 50,000 RPM, I think, thereabouts. I'll look back into that. And then to your right is the voltmeter. So there's no oil pressure gauge. Not that I can see anywhere anyway, even on the screen here. But still, it's pretty good. It gives you that kind of racer feel, even though this is, again, more GT. Now, the vents for the AC are actually really cool. You have them on the door right here, which is one on the either side, and then you have these 2 right here. It's got, of course, an automatic climate control system, which is very useful, but me, generally, I put it onto the manual mode anyway, so it doesn't really matter for me. But steering wheel, it's very, very round. It's, of course, very round. It's got controls for your audio system on the left and the controls for the screen on the left as well. So I can change the view depending on what I want to focus on. Right now, I've got it on the advanced safety view, which is really cool. So it has the forward collision warning and, of course, the AEB, the blind spot warning, the lane warning, all that stuff. They actually outfit this one with all the advanced safety features that they can. And then, of course, adaptive cruise control. When you activate that, you can just set the distance to the car in front of you, and then it'll just follow it, prioritize the distance over the actual speed that you're going. Right behind the steering wheel, 2 paddle shifters, because this is the 9-speed automatic variant. The manual version, of course, would not have that. It'll just have the manual stick there. And speaking of the gear selector or the drive selector on this was something I'm not a big fan of, because the way they made it look, I don't know, like the head of the xenomorph from Alien, the way that looks. I don't know if that makes any sense. But to put it into P, you press that. To put it into reverse, you slide it forward, and you put it in. Oh, when you do that, the rear camera does come out, and I can see Zach's shoes because he's right there in the back. It doesn't have a 360 camera. It only has a reverse camera, which is unusual with the lines. That also I found a bit weird, because you would think that this would be already fitted with a 360 camera and a higher resolution one. This one, not really that great a resolution, but still not really that important in a Z. And then you put it into drive, right there, slide it back, and then you pull it one more time to go into the manual mode. But you can override it if you want with the paddle shifters, even if you're in D, which is normal for a lot of these kinds of cars. Of course, the lever handbrake, not an electronic parking brake, proper for something like this. So if you want to do drifting, which I'm not going to do, you can, well, maybe not in the automatic variant, but just pull that while you clutch in and then, do all that fun stuff. There are 2 drive modes in this one. I was actually surprised there were only 2, but you adjust that by this toggle here. When you put it, right now it's in standard. When you push it up, it goes into sport. So if you look at your screen, you'll know that you're in sport mode. It's basically a more aggressive map for the transmission. It doesn't really alter the suspension. The suspension is not a variable suspension type like the one in the GTR, which I drove just last week. Now back to the gauge, tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right, all that stuff. You can adjust the many views that you have, from the fuel economy to the tire pressure. Right now, it does have a tire pressure monitoring system, but the one in the rear right is malfunctioning, so I have to reset that. And then all that stuff, really not much to report there. Unlike the GTR, this is a much more advanced unit, which is more in keeping with Nissan stuff. So it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto when you press it right there. So basically, you can connect via the USB or the USB-C, depending on what you want to do. Right now, my Waze is off because my phone is tucked in under there, but all well and good. So yeah, you do have a USB-C and USB-A port. You can connect to this, no problem. Ignition button there. The seat heaters over here. I mean, we're not gonna use that in the Philippine market. So you do have 2 cup holders in the 400Z. Not that you would really use it for that kind of thing, but still, you can have your water bottle or cup there. The other one is actually tucked in here underneath the lid. So, which is, kind of odd, but still, there you go. You have 2 cup holders there for stuff. There's a little compartment here with a 12-volt outlet if you want to use that. What I really like, though, is the way they did this seat, or even this seat. And now, normally, when you do have adjustment for your seats and stuff, you have them on the left side, at least for the left-hand drive units, you have them on the left side. But in this one, you have them in the middle, which I think is brilliant. So if I want to adjust, let's say, my seat, there's actually a switch here. Move forward, right? Move, recline, right there. Same with this one. You should be able to see this more clearly by right there, which is, I think, really brilliant, because it just, well, for one, if you're in a left-hand drive car, it avoids you scuffing up your watch, and it's also much easier, which is cool. And now with the back, we can show you that there is a ledge here, which I'm using right now, but there's a ledge here. You can keep a bag for an out-of-town trip, that kind of thing. There is no rear seat, which is expected. There is a pocket here for manuals and stuff, but really that's about it. You also have a glove compartment, and then up top you have the normal light. You do have the sun visor with a pull-out extension there, which is useful. Let's say if the sun is peeking through, this does have long windows, so if the sun is peeking through, you can cover that there and have a bit of shade from the sun. My only real criticism of here is actually the driving position I do like, but I do wish Nissan updated the actual parts bin for their stuff, because all of the switches here, they look very familiar. I mean, this switch for the trunk is actually kind of very similar to the one in the Terra, to be able to flip the middle row. The power window switches, all that, I do recognize a lot of stuff. So yeah, I would have thought they would have updated the parts bin for a lot of their switches, but still, it's a very nice, it seems to be a very nice driver-centric interior. I would have wanted more details, like, you know, a centering tab here, but again, this is not a all-out race car. The Nismo version, I think, would be that, or, you know, at least the more performance-oriented one. But still, it's an interesting one to take out. So let's take it out and have a bit of fun with the Z. Okay, first impressions after driving the Z for a few hours, it's comfortable. I mean, it's not a super performance car in the sense that they've tuned the suspension. They did, but they still gave it a lot of give for everyday driving, for this kind of thing. Grand touring, well, not really grand touring. We're inside one of the nicest villages just to the east of Metro Manila, which is Palo Alto. And driving it around here on this, well, concrete roads, it's actually nice and all right. I mean, you're just cruising. It's okay. It's actually quite comfortable. That is something that will surprise you. And then when you're just cruising, it's not so noisy. I mean, it's going to be noisier than, let's say, an executive sedan, if that's really what you want to compare it to. But for a two-seater sports car or GT, it's actually nice and perfect. I would even contend that if, let's say, the GTR is something else, and I did get the opportunity to drive the GTR and this one almost practically back to back. I had the GTR last week, and this one, like, driving here, it's very, very GT, and I like it. Now, one thing that you do have to pay attention to when you're driving a Z, particularly in this color, is that you will attract a lot of attention. That is something like when we're comparing, let's say, the Z. I mean, they're not really comparable in terms of direct competitors as cars, but in terms of, like, for the money, if you're looking at it from that perspective, if you have 3.9 million or 3.88 million to spend on a nice car, it really depends on what you want. You know, this one, it's a bit more flashy, especially again in this color. People do, you know, look at you and look at who's driving that car. In the Civic Type R, not so much. It's kind of incognito. And I mean, it is a performance car. It does look pretty cool, but you have to really be an enthusiast to know that, hey, that's a Type R, to be able to discern that, you know, away from the Civic crowd. I know a lot of Civic guys are gonna be mad at me for saying that, but this one, if you're not bothered by the extra attention, you're gonna be fine in a Z. And when you do drive it, you look for a little bit more handling. Yeah, it's nice. It's not gonna be as sharp as the Nismo version, which we haven't driven yet. But I mean, even compared to the Civic Type R, I think I would contend the Type R may be a sharper cornering machine because, well, they've tuned it to be that way. They've really elevated the Civic. This one is great for this, you know, boulevard cruising. You're just casually moseying along. But when you want to put your foot down, we're not going to do it inside here. Let's go outside for that. How is the Z for power? Well, let's put it in sport mode. Floor it. Oh, I've got a Type R behind me. Let's see if it can keep up. Woo! That was fun. So the acceleration of the Z, just over 4 seconds from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. But that's not really where the sweet spot of the car is. It's really when you encounter a road like this. Like, you just approach a corner and then you make a nice wide turn, take a late apex, and then you add a little power. That's the beauty of these cars. It's just enjoyable to drive. And it's not so much about ultimate performance like something like the Type R, because when the Type R, they took a Civic and then they level it up. But in a car like this, it's just something great for cruising. And that's where you're going to enjoy it. There's also a drawback though, because the handling limit of a car like this isn't going to be as high like if you put a sport suspension, the Nismo version there. But I mean, we don't have the Nismo version in the Philippines yet. I'm sure eventually we will. And when we do, that's going to be something enjoyable to drive. Now, in terms of fuel economy, if you really want me to focus on the fuel economy for something like this, don't be expecting anywhere more than, let's say, depending on the average speed, usually around 20. We're getting around 5.2. So yeah, and that's already actually kind of being gentle with the throttle, like saving it for this drive. On the highway, yeah, around 11, you can expect that. If you're being gentle, if you're flooring it all the time, of course, forget about it. So I'm back aboard the Civic Type R, and let me tell you now, any chance I get to drive this, I'll absolutely take it, as I'm sure a lot of you will too, because this is a pretty incredible variant of the Civic. And we say variant because it is pretty much a Civic, but leveled up in so many ways. We can't really call it a totally separate car. I know a lot of Honda Civic and Type R fans would not like me saying that, but in many ways it still feels like a Civic, and that's what it's supposed to be. It's got seats for, well, more than two people, usually four, mostly for this kind of thing. It also drives very well in the city. You do hear a bit more noise because it does have the wider tires on the larger rims, but still you have space, you have practicality, as much practicality as a Civic Type R can afford you. So you can drive this every day, even in Metro Manila traffic. You just have to, make do with the manual transmission. But once you get out of the city and you start exploring modes outside of comfort mode, like right now we're in comfort mode, and then you put it into sport, it becomes a bit more aggressive. The throttle response is a bit more lively. But when you start going into plus R, that's when everything just firms up. The steering gets a bit heavier, the suspension gets a bit firmer, and the throttle response becomes far more liberated. That is what the Type R delivers. And it's an experience that even for a front-wheel drive, you really can't get with a lot of other cars. This kind of, like, when you point it, it just rotates very well. And the brakes also are really good on this one, even though this one has had, I think, 12,000 kilometers on it already. And mind you, it's had a couple of track days already. Some of the other guys in the media drove this, so I hope they took care of it, because we don't really push it all out. Well, I did on the when it was new, but but still, this is still an enjoyable car to drive. But it's very different. It's a very different experience than what you would get in the Nissan Z. Now, we can't compare those two directly. We can only tell you that the experience from one to the other plays to the strengths of both. Like, Honda is really good when it comes to their front-wheel drive cars. They really specialize in that. I mean, they did have the S2000. When they did that, it was also incredible. But generally speaking, it's Nissan that does the rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive very, very well. Mitsubishi does the all-wheel drive, rally-style all-wheel drive also very well. Same with Subaru. So Nissan and Honda are actually playing into their strengths with both of these cars. And while not comparable, they deliver thrills, but in very different ways. One more thing. The Civic Type R has something called, it does a rev matching when you downshift, even with the manual, without having to heel and toe. That's one of the nice things about it. But the interesting thing is that I think it was Nissan that came up with that first in the 370Z, more than a decade ago. To be perfectly honest with you, I love both of these cars, but for very different things. The Type R, I can really enjoy it on an everyday basis, meaning I wouldn't mind going through with a manual even in our Christmas traffic. But the Type R, what it offers you, well, more seating, you've got capacity in the back if you need a boot, and if you want to drive hard, this will oblige. This Z absolutely fantastic as well. Now, it's not going to be as sharp or as pointy as some of the other sportier offerings in our market, but what's cool is that they are giving us two very different types of performance depending on what you're after. You have the power of choice. Now, like I said before, both of these vehicles, 3.88 million, but given how it is with the reseller market and how it is with supply and demand, you might not be able to get it for that price. So if you can get a Z for 3.88 or even a Type R for 3.88, probably more, well, let us know in the comments below which one you would pick. As for me, well, the one I'm going to pick is